Listen closely to what Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett won't sugarcoat. In just one devastating accusation, least qualified FBI director in history, followed by a systematic dismantling of Kash Patel's failures, right-wing death threats against Republicans, HBCU bomb threats he ignored, and his arrogant I don't give a damn dismissal of a black woman's safety concerns. The moral bankruptcy of Trump's FBI leadership would be exposed through what Patel refused to acknowledge about white supremacist terrorism. Crockett didn't expect to be the only member willing to call Patel exactly what he was, an unqualified political operative playing FBI director while America's most vulnerable communities faced escalating violence he wouldn't investigate. Patel didn't expect a black congresswoman from Texas to document that he's the only FBI director in history who never served in the FBI, couldn't staff the Bureau for 14 years, took credit for cases parents solved, and ignored domestic terrorism against HBCUs while claiming I don't give a damn what critics say. What did Crockett's fearless testimony reveal about how Patel's incompetence and white supremacist enablement were making America less safe for everyone except violent extremists? March 20th, 2025, 11:47 a.m. House Judiciary Committee. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett from Texas' 30th District approached the microphone not with the careful diplomacy her Democratic colleagues had deployed all morning, but with the moral clarity of someone who understood that politeness in the face of institutional failure was itself a form of complicity. The civil rights attorney and former public defender had built her reputation on refusing to accept evasive answers or normalize the unacceptable, and today she would deploy that fearlessness to say what every Democrat was thinking, but most were too cautious to articulate. Kash Patel was destroying the FBI and making America dangerously unsafe. FBI Director Kash Patel sat with the confident posture of someone who had survived a full day of hostile questioning through deflection, statistics, and attacks on questioners' motives. His strategy had been remarkably consistent: cite arrest numbers, claim historic achievements, accuse critics of political theatrics. But he hadn't faced Jasmine Crockett, a black woman who understood viscerally what it meant when law enforcement prioritized political loyalty over protecting vulnerable communities from escalating right-wing violence. Man, oh man, there has been so much today, and I truly don't know where to start. Crockett began, her tone carrying none of the senatorial formality that typically characterized congressional questioning. This wasn't going to be careful lawyering. This was going to be truth-telling. So I'm just going to make sure we start with a few facts, she continued, establishing that what followed would be documented reality, not partisan speculation. Fact number 1. Director Christopher Wray, when he was appointed to be the head of the FBI, was appointed by Donald Trump. The reminder was strategic. Crockett was preempting Patel's inevitable deflection that Trump investigations were partisan witch hunts. The cases he was so angry about, the ones that led to mass firings of FBI agents, came through Trump's own hand-picked FBI director. There was no deep state conspiracy. There was just law enforcement doing its job regardless of whose political allies were implicated. Now, I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, Crockett said, then delivered the accusation that would define the entire exchange. Because I did have to make sure I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining. At 11:48 a.m., exactly 1 minute into Crockett's time, she had delivered the most devastating factual indictment any witness could face. Patel was literally the least qualified person to ever hold his position. Not partisan hyperbole, documented historical fact. Every previous FBI director, from J. Edgar Hoover to Louis Freeh to Robert Mueller to James Comey to Christopher Wray, had extensive federal law enforcement experience before becoming director. Patel had zero, yet we are supposed to believe that you are the greatest thing since sliced bread, Crockett added, her voice dripping with justified skepticism. Patel attempted to interrupt. I didn't ask you a question, Crockett cut him off immediately, refusing to cede her time to his defensive posturing. Now what I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure, and why honestly we just need to tell you bye-bye, Crockett continued, her directness shocking in its departure from congressional decorum, but refreshing in its honesty. I know you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday, she said, referencing Patel's explosive confrontation. But let's go through some of your failures. Then Crockett began the systematic documentation of Patel's record that other Democrats had hinted at but never articulated with such prosecutorial precision. Before you were even confirmed, you were already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his hand-picked FBI director. The logic was irrefutable. Patel claimed FBI agents were biased against Trump, but those agents were investigating cases under Christopher Wray, Trump's own appointment. Either Trump appointed a director who allowed bias, or the investigations were legitimate. Patel couldn't have it both ways. Then Crockett delivered the line that would expose the racial dimension of Patel's failures that white Democrats had been too uncomfortable to name directly. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, we're happy because now we feel safe. I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically, as a black woman, definitely don't feel safe. The personal testimony was devastating because it connected Patel's policy failures to lived experience. While Patel was firing experienced counterterrorism agents and redirecting resources to immigration enforcement, right-wing domestic terrorism was escalating. In the communities most vulnerable to that violence, Black Americans, Jewish Americans, immigrant communities were watching the FBI deprioritize their safety. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor, Crockett said, acknowledging that her approach was deliberately more confrontational than the careful questioning her colleagues had deployed, because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues, and frankly, I don't know if under your leadership, those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you. Then Crockett began presenting documentary evidence that would expose Patel's deliberate refusal to acknowledge the primary domestic terrorism threat facing America, right-wing extremism. And if we start talking about the reasons I lack confidence, we could start with you, not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts, like the vast majority of the threats, are coming from right-wing extremism. And I know my colleagues have tried to stress this, but I decided I would maybe do it in a different way. What followed was a systematic presentation of evidence with the procedural formality of without objection, the congressional mechanism for entering documents into the official record. Number 1. Kim Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker. Without objection. The evidence was strategic. Republicans threatening Republicans over political disagreements. Not Antifa, not BLM, not leftist radicals, right-wing extremists terrorizing their own party members for insufficient loyalty. Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race, without objection. 2 examples established a pattern, but Crockett had more. In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm without objection. 3 documented cases of right-wing domestic terrorism targeting Republican members of Congress, and Patel refused to acknowledge this as the primary threat. While he was busy firing agents who investigated Trump and redirecting counterterrorism resources to immigration enforcement, violent extremists were terrorizing elected officials with impunity. Okay, so here's the deal, Crockett continued, shifting from evidence presentation to devastating synthesis. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? The admission that Patel himself had made 14 years to fully staff the FBI revealed catastrophic mismanagement. He had fired thousands of experienced agents and now admitted it would take more than a decade to replace them. That's not reform, that's institutional destruction. You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets, Crockett added, documenting the mission drift that was gutting FBI core competencies. You're getting rid of your most qualified people. Then Crockett moved to the case that had become Patel's most embarrassing claimed victory, the Charlie Kirk assassination investigation. And even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner, to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody. And then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap. The reference was to Patel's premature celebration on social media, claiming FBI had solved the Kirk case. But as Crockett was about to reveal, the FBI hadn't solved anything. Because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there, even though he literally confessed online. The indictment was complete. The shooter had confessed online, the FBI missed it, parents turned in their own son, and Patel posted twice, claiming FBI credit for a case they hadn't solved. This wasn't competence. This was stolen valor in law enforcement form. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing, except for trying to put on a show for The Apprentice or whatever you want to call him, Crockett said, her contempt for Patel's performance-based leadership undisguised. Then she delivered the evidence of Patel's failures that hit closest to her own community. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. Historically, black colleges and universities had faced coordinated bomb threats, clear domestic terrorism targeting black institutions. And while Patel was posting about cases he didn't solve and firing agents who investigated Trump, actual terrorism against black students was met with FBI silence. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem. The one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches. At 11:52 a.m., exactly 5 minutes into her questioning, Crockett's time expired. Chairman Jordan offered Patel the opportunity to respond. What came next would expose the contempt with which Patel viewed legitimate oversight from a black woman expressing safety concerns on behalf of vulnerable communities. Here's what I've learned in my government service, Patel began, his tone dripping with arrogance. I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission. The response was stunning in its dismissiveness. A black congresswoman had just testified that she didn't feel safe, that HBCUs were under terrorist attack, that right-wing extremism was escalating, that Patel was the least qualified FBI director in history. And his response was, I don't give a damn. We're succeeding in the mission because the men and women of the FBI have never been empowered to do more work and to hit the streets harder than by President Trump's authorities and resources he's given us. Patel continued, pivoting immediately to his standard talking points about arrest statistics. And so all I care about is that we are capturing more child predators than ever before, taking more drugs off the streets than ever before, that we are capturing murderers at a significantly historic rate, and we're delivering this country the lowest murder rate in recorded history. Those are facts you cannot dispute, but you can come at me all you want. I don't care. The response revealed everything about Patel's leadership. Cite statistics, dismiss critics, refuse to engage with substance. A black woman says she doesn't feel safe because of right-wing terrorism and HBCU attacks. Patel's response, I don't give a damn. The aftermath exposed the racial fault lines in American law enforcement. Conservative media praised Patel for not backing down, but civil rights groups noted that dismissing safety concerns from black communities while refusing to prioritize white supremacist terrorism was itself the institutional failure. Crockett documented, within days, evidence supported every claim. FBI missed the online confession. HBCU threats remained unsolved. Right-wing violence was the primary domestic threat. Patel's 14 years admission became shorthand for catastrophic mismanagement. What Crockett accomplished was expose what careful questioning couldn't. Patel was the least qualified director in history, made Americans less safe, and dismissed criticism with arrogance. Sometimes powerful testimony is fearless truth that refuses to accept failure.